Hi. Hi. Good morning. Well, where is everybody located at? Where are you based at?
So, Wayne, I'm hiding in my makeshift office, which is in the secluded part of my bedroom. But I'm based out of San Jose. This strange accent is not something that I've picked up over the last 8 weeks. I was born in Ghana. I've spent most of my life in England before moving over to the Bay Area. But really delighted to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Nice, nice. Welcome. Feel free.
Likewise. My name is Brandon Samut. I'm with you today from Berkeley, California. And like Will, I've been sheltering in place for about 2 months now with my partner and my two kids, a 3-year-old and a 10-month-old. You may see one or both of them while we're doing the panel today.
Got it. Cool.
I'm currently at my parents' house in Sunnyvale, California. I live at the top of the mountain that makes Silicon Valley a valley. Not the best internet connections up there, so came down to the valley where I'm kind of quarantining with my parents. But I'm originally from Northern Canada, so if you hear me say out or process, you know why.
Got it. Got it.
And I'm here in Palo Alto, although like Will, you may detect that I'm not quite from this state. And I've been sheltering here pretty much since the start of things with my wife.
Got it. Got it. Cool. So Canada, UK, Ghana. Brandon, did you say where you're from originally?
From Detroit.
Detroit. So, yeah. Well, you know, we're all in tech and we're all from different parts of the world. So great. But thank you all for joining us. Really look for this conversation on the future work. So I'm gonna just dive right in. First off, everyone's okay. Thumbs up. Everyone's good. Family's good. All right.
Very good.
My 92-year-old aunt passed away, unfortunately,
Oh, sorry. Sorry to hear about that.
last week.
Oh, sorry to hear about that.
Mhm.
You okay?
As okay as I'm gonna be.
Okay. Okay. All right.
Hard not to be able to get to Halifax. It's just not possible. So we gathered online, and we'll do something when it's all over.
Yeah. Well, let us know if you need anything in the chat and post with it, and we do it. Do what we can support you. And thanks for sharing. Thanks for your transparency.
And before you kick off, I mean, just to answer the question in terms of how I'm feeling. One of the things that this period has really done for me is helped me to be deeply appreciative of all that I have. So, I kind of start the day on just dwelling on how fortunate I am to be working. I have a family, I have folks I can turn to, and so it's really brought home what's really important over this period. So I just want to express that and just remind you and remind all of us who are listening that this is a time to take to heart those things that you value and appreciate them.
Agreed. Yeah. The worries have been thinking so much the past couple of weeks is grateful. Just being grateful. So yeah. And so with everything has happened, and you're all in different professional work environments, what changed the most? Like was it mindset? Was it your being aware, the mindset of your behavior change of taking care of yourself and being productive? So what was it like in terms of as we're talking about the future work, but also future work during the pandemic, and just even like the future work may be different how it is even like now, 3 months, 6 months, 2 years. So what was the biggest change for you all?
I kick off. I think just first when I think about the change from a company perspective, I moved very fast to becoming a remote workplace company. 7,000 people. The speed of that transition has been fairly impressive. The operating model in terms of how we work in itself is flexible. So in some respects, we've had to think long and hard about making this pivot. But when the moment of crisis came and that order came, I think we executed a work from home strategy fairly well, or very well. I've just come off a back of a global event hosted by myself and a bunch of other colleagues, where this is something that we do in person once a year. We typically pick a city in Europe or a city in the US. We get 750 people together in one location, and we were in the throes of actually planning that when all of a sudden we were told to pivot and run as fast as we can to move from a physical location in the ballroom of a hotel somewhere to a virtual event. Look, I'm pleased to sort of say that we did move rapidly to a virtual event, and things have changed dramatically. If you can just imagine the fact that the interaction, the presentations, the networking, all of that is normally in person. But we've pulled it off. We went virtual, and it was a challenge. It was a challenge in many, many ways. But again, that just highlights the fact that anything and everything is possible. And so, I think the way in which ARM as a company has moved to this new reality has been quite impressive. And the human spirit, it's still enabling us to get the job that we need to get done in a remarkably different environment. So yeah, lots has changed, but we're adapting very well.
Yeah.
So just to add to that, I think a lot of people don't realize that tens of thousands, literally, if not more, people with disabilities have ended up having to quit their jobs because they requested work from home as a reasonable accommodation and were turned down for it. It was too hard, it couldn't be done, it was going to be expensive, they weren't trusted to get the job done. And now all of a sudden, overnight, with this pivot, as people are calling it, we're now in a situation that I like to refer to as a great big disability simulation exercise for people without disabilities. They're trying to figure out how to accommodate themselves at home. And I think if any company of significant size ever claims again that it's an undue burden for a single individual with a disability to be working from home, they're going to get laughed out of the EEOC hearing, I hope.
Yeah, great point, Sherry. Great point.
Actually, more broadly on that theme, one of the things I noticed was, so I've been in people management for a long time, and I do it because I love supporting people. And in that profession, you care about how closely you actually understand the lived experience of the people around you, particularly the people you're supporting directly. This situation has forced us to confront really understanding what other people are going through in ways that we haven't necessarily had to before. The how are you has become, no, seriously, how are you? Like, what can I do? The individual needs of people, completely obvious things to us now, like all of the accommodations for people with children. So focusing on families and forgetting that people who are by themselves are going to sit there suffering from loneliness because we haven't had to live through this experience before. So one of the things I've seen most is people asking the deeper, more beautiful version of questions when they're supporting other people, and I'm really pleased to see that.
Couldn't agree more, Andre. It's with our team, it is also challenging long-held assumptions in ways that I think are incredibly healthy and productive. And then, I might also pivot a little bit to some of the emerging challenges that we're seeing as well, because all of the benefits that Will, Andre, and Sherry that you mentioned, we're experiencing as well. And we consider it a privilege to be in that position. I think about, members of my family, for example, who are in food service, or my brother-in-law is a dentist. Their kind of situation is very different. They're being asked to return to a physical work site, even now when so many things are up in the air. And so, what a privilege to be, working with an organization that can, flex into a mostly or all remote format. As simply as it sounds like many of our organizations have. So I feel very thankful for that. And then meanwhile, about 2 months in, our workforce is 1,100 people, about 90% are remote right now. But about 2 months in, we're starting to see some of the challenges that we're going to need to manage through in this mostly remote format. So, in some cases, the blurring of the line between, basically like the work site and the home site for so many people now are one and the same. And, there are some advantages to that, and there are some challenges as well. And one of the things we're seeing too is that we have, teammates that are trying to find their way in reestablishing the boundaries between family life and work life. Now that physically those two things are often happening, in the same place, right? So that's something that we're working through right now. Similarly, without some of the natural breakpoints, like a commute is often a natural shift point between work and home, at least for folks who are used to having a commute. And now too, that disappears. So you get some time back, that's the upside, the silver lining, but also a challenge is we need to find new rituals, even if it's just a mindset shift, to make sure that we're maintaining our energy, maintaining our effort for the long haul, because for so many people and for so many organizations, it'll be many, many months before people even have the opportunity to potentially shift back. But in some ways, I hope we never do shift completely back. For Sherry, I think the point that you made is a perfect example of that. I love how this challenge is producing some fresh ways of thinking that I think will help organizations to be potentially a lot more inclusive than maybe we've been in the past.
Yeah, agreed. And thank you all for sharing. And with that, you all touch on some very important topics, because this session is future work, and there's talk about going back to normal. I personally don't think we're ever going to go back to a complete normal. And then there's the well, what does the future of work look like for people who are trying to go back to normal? And then there's this line of future work in tech and future work non-tech jobs. Because like you touched on, Brandon, like I have family members as well. It's like they can't afford to work from home. They can't work from home, right? So what does the future work look like? I would ask the question in a hybrid way. Tech companies are announcing they're not going back to the offices to 2021. They're planning that far along. So what does the future work look like for tech? And then what does the future work look like? I don't want to be like everyone else, but like for non-tech roles, because it's going to be challenging.
So I'll start by saying that I think AI is going to play a bigger role, especially on the tech side of things. I would like to see a day where captions are just always there in teleconferencing, and you don't remember a day when it wasn't there. It's kind of like, my 17-year-old daughter, when she saw a newspaper dispensing machine at the airport once, said, "Wasn't it nice that they had a place that I could reheat my coffee?" She had no concept of newspaper dispensing machines when they were, in our lives every day, not 20 years earlier. So there's been a couple of breakthroughs in technology with respect to speech recognition lately. Microsoft Teams, Google Meets, Otter.ai. It's gone from pretty bad to actually not too terrible. And I'd like to see that definitely factor into the future of work going forward. I think assistive technology, intermediaries between people and the computers that they're using, like virtual reality, will definitely become more common. And there is accessible virtual reality development going on. So that's really great, because people who are blind can participate in virtual reality. They should be able to.
That's a great point. Yeah, just to add to that, I think like everybody else, we're all learning to adapt. We're all learning to rebalance things to make this current reality workable for all. But the one thing that I think that we're doing at ARM is not losing sight of the fact that all employees and teams still want and need what they've always wanted and needed. I know it's important for me, which is a sense of purpose in their work, whether you're in tech or outside of work. We all want fulfilling relationships with our colleagues. We all want to be appreciated and recognized for the contributions that we bring to bear. We want a healthy work and life balance, and we want to make sure that the values of the company that we work for are not just spoken words, and but in essence they become living words. And I think that yes, okay, COVID has taken a lot from us, and it'll continue to take a lot from us, but it's also given us an opportunity to bring some of those values to work, to show that we really care. One of the things that we're doing, which I'm really proud of, is the fact that we're really consciously thinking about how do we support our employees both physically and mental health. Just to give an example of that, recently, a newly promoted manager just simply felt overwhelmed by the challenges of delivering in his new role, whilst at the same time, contributing to what I think is far more important, which is looking after his children and being present at home. And the only way and the right way to deal with an individual like that is to individualize the solution for that particular person. And so we've talked a lot, we talked about lots of different possibilities, and we've ended up with an individual who does 4 hours on, takes some time off, and then comes back on in the evening. So technology is important, and I can move on later on to talk about where I think tech can come in. But it starts with people, and it starts with just making sure that that people are in a healthy state of mind to be able to contribute. And whether that's now or post-COVID, those things in my mind are not going to change.
Personalization is definitely a curb cut. It benefits everybody, but it especially benefits people with disabilities. And I think we're going to see more and more of that going forward in the new future workplace.
The other thing is, I like to think for a second about non-tech workers, people in industries where to do the job non-physically is borderline impossible. And so the changes that we will see as urban density, for example, changes, because people are not going to want to live on top of each other anymore. And we see the kind of sprawl you have in LA versus the kind of density you have in, say, New York. Things like accessibility, also access to transport, is going to become a much bigger issue, because people are going to be traveling further for work, and they're going to be traveling to places that are more spread out. So I'm really interested to see how that's going to evolve.
A great point.
I would also say, to the extent, for those of us that, work in technology companies and are thinking about, friends and family, neighbors who, don't have the option to work, from home or remotely, for example, as economies start to reopen, we should think about how to support, workers who do need to return to a physical site, and in making sure that they have the setup, right, from an accessibility point of view, from a safety point of view. We should all, it's kind of on all of us together, right? It's like great for employees in those organizations to apply pressure and make sure that they have what they need to be safe and successful. But as customers of those products and services, we should be making the same demands of employers, right? We should all be applying pressure and creativity, because it's going to take a lot of creativity to figure out how to do this, and it's going to look different for hospitality than it does for food service, than it does for manufacturing. But if we ask for, different things, if we demand that the companies that we buy products and services from, look out for the, accessibility and the safety of their workers during and after the pandemic, it is that much more likely that workers, like some of the friends, family, and neighbors that we've talked about, will be able to return to work in a way that we can be proud of.
I think another thing we're going to have to think through is education for people who are in those situations, especially healthcare. So I have 2 daughters currently in PhD programs related to healthcare. One is studying to be a psychologist, and the other is studying to be an audiologist. And they're both in the point of their education where they're supposed to be doing clinic hours. They're each supposed to do 2,000 clinic hours in order to get their PhDs, but their clinics are closed. And that's, again, where I think virtual reality may step in, where we start doing VR clinic hours, where you patients that you treat without them being actual real patients, but maybe based on patient personas from real cases. But that kind of stuff we need to think through now, because there are kids that have invested 13 years of their lives to get to where, I say kids, young adults, 13 years of their lives to get to where they are today, and being in the last year and not being able to get to the finish line because you can't get your 1,000 last clinic hours, that's a problem.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, education. Go ahead, Will.
I was just going to add that, as I was listening to some of the comments, I think that the technology sector has a huge responsibility. I think it's without question that technology is more present now than ever before in our daily lives. From our commute to work and how we actually get our work done, technology plays a really pivotal role. If you just wind the clock back to 30 years ago and just think about, before internet, before smartphones, I don't know if what we're living with now, if that happened, 30, 35 years ago, how would we have coped? And And so, you know, I've spent the last 30 years of my life in tech. I just think that we have an awesome responsibility and privilege to deliver a workplace and home place environment that work becomes easier, becomes better, becomes more satisfying for all. So it's not just an opportunity.
I think we lost you, Will. Yeah, all good. Things happen. Yeah, sorry about that.
I think the responsibility to make life easier, work easier, and work more satisfying for all.
Lost you a bit there, Will, but it's okay. It's okay. Want to jump to one of the questions. I have a lot more questions, as you know, and there's a lot of questions in the chat. I want to thank everyone for your questions in the chat, in the Q&A. There's a couple questions I do want to touch on. Someone can answer briefly. As about workforce development and skilling up. Like I have an assumption and thought, but like I would love to hear, what do you think is going to be the advantage of how to, not say the advantage, but like how people are going to skill up and be rewarded with, learning new skills and inside of a company.
I mean, one of the things that I would anticipate is that you think about how workforce training and development happens, and there's still so much of it that's kind of site-based or classroom-based, and there's already a surge in kind of online or virtual development. But I think you'll find, in particularly in tech, but you think about exactly like what Sherry mentioned, for example. Like as folks can do like practicums and more kind of like, we think about hands-on training as having to be something that you do at a physical site. And I think what we're seeing or what we're being challenged to reconsider is whether that is always the case. And surely it's not. And so I think, we're gonna advance our thinking and our work on this faster than maybe we expected, which I think, makes the prospect of upskilling workforces, including ones that are more distributed, that much more possible. So I think, clearly a lot of opportunity there.
I think really intense apprenticeships, which I think is a variation on what Brandon was saying, is going to be something that we're going to start seeing more of. You can't get a college degree in accessibility. It doesn't exist. You can't get a college degree really in user research. I mean, you could do like a focused graduate study, but not an actual degree in it. And hands-on is really the best way to learn this stuff. But when I say hands-on, I don't necessarily mean in person. So definitely bite-sized online modules where if you have a meeting that ends 15 minutes early, you go do a module. You get stuck in an airport. Well, this is where I used to do a lot of my training, but let's say you're at a doctor's office and, the doctor's 15 minutes late, do another module. So there's going to be the informal learning that's going to be the do another module variety. And then I think the more structured apprenticeship training where you would actually do an 18-month accessibility apprentice and have some meaningful credentials that you can then supply saying, okay, I've done this and this is what my apprenticeship means that I'm skilled to do.
Got it. Thank you both. And Shireen, thanks for the question. Andre, I want to jump you right quick. You direct engineering and there's this conversation around like, okay, people being more productive in some cases, working remote, some not. What do you think? How you think it's going to be in terms of like moving forward, managing engineering teams and post-COVID or in the next 36 months? Like, is it going to be like, is it as productive or what does that balance look like?
So what I can say is productivity looks fine right now, which is great and has me worried at the same time. Because if it turns out that productivity is fine right now because people are filling gaps in their lives with work because they're not sure what else to do, we are at risk of hitting problems down the line. And so one of the things we're being very mindful of right now is to go, hey, great, it turns out that we're emitting code at roughly the same rate. But how is everyone doing? And are there leading indicators that actually we should have expected to slow down? Maybe, maybe not, but we want to be super conscious of that potential outcome. The other thing I'll say is that so much of engineering work is already designed around a scalable process, distributed source control, async code review, decoupled release cadences, all these practices we have in engineering. And so I don't feel like the process for writing and operating software is likely to change very much as a result of what we're going through. What is likely to change, to the point that some others have made, is how we come together to decide what to build. Like, one of the earliest flurries of activity I saw at LinkedIn, I'm sure everyone's seen this as well, is what on earth should we use to replace the whiteboards we were using last week? How are we going to collaborate creatively around the work we plan to do? And so all the other stuff, like the teams I work with, they have conventions for writing tech specs, developing user review experiences, and so forth. And all of these conventions are scalable in their current form. I have a strong feeling that companies that are more sort of conversational about these processes are going to have to make the shift to just writing more stuff down and keeping track of it more formally. And for some companies, this will be business as usual. And for some companies, this will be a little bit of a culture shock. However, I will say, writing more stuff down and its equivalent corollaries is also an accessibility thing, because it means that the actual outputs of people's brains are more accessible to other people to be consumed at their own pace, in their own way. And so that is one practical improvement I think we're going to see in the engineering industry.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank you all for joining. Thanks everyone for the questions. To all the attendees watching, please reach out to all the panelists on social media, information on the Tech Inclusion website. Again, Sherry, Brandon, Andrew, Will, our ASL interpreter Amber, thank you all. And we'll see you online, and stay safe, stay healthy.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
You as well. Thank you.